welcome to episode 148 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I am here with
Logan Milburn,
Lydia Creech,
Nathan Smith.
In today's episode, we'll be talking about movies we saw this week in part 1, and in part 2, we will be continuing our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series with 1933's Tabu, a story of the South.
Well, let me just say, I made a mistake because I watched the Miguel Gomez Tabu.
Well, I'm glad we got this out of the way at the first, during the first portion of the podcast.
Wow, I watched like the 2012 Portuguese Lisbon set, African set, black and white Tabu, and took notes.
All right, well, I guess we can have the discussion on the 1933 version of, the 1933 film, and then we can have you take us through the most recent Tabu.
I guess so, because I was thinking when you were saying old series, I was like, old films, 2012 ain't that old. That's a stretch.
I was thinking that maybe I should leave a comment on the post just to make sure everybody was on the same page, and I was like, no, I don't need to.
I was like, he
do
must
it.
be talking about the crocodile movie.
All right, well, next time I'll specify.
And it was on
Tabu.
Fandor. It was on.
They both were on Fandor. They both were.
See, it was that perfect a series of events that was like, wow, I couldn't have thought differently.
I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there. All right, well, let's go ahead and do movies we saw this week. Logan, you had you had one you wanted to quickly talk about, and you had another one you wanted to discuss more.
Sure. The first movie I guess I'll talk about is It Comes at Night. The yes, I like the sound effect. The Trey Edward Schultz follow-up to his debut film Krisha. It Comes at Night. I guess came out last weekend to the unfortunate cinema score of about a D, which is usually now for word of mouth. It's true, but this film primarily takes place in an isolated location in, I guess you could say, the woods. Joel Edgerton and his wife, played by Carmen Ejogo, who played Coretta Scott King in Selma, and she was also in Alien Covenant, are a couple with about a 17-year-old son. I'm trying to think back. I don't know if it was necessarily specified that he for sure is the 17-year-old boy's father, but there's nothing in the way that really says that he isn't. So I guess we'll go with that. That basically they're a couple with this son, and shortly after the film begins, which begins with the murder, another family basically arrives. The wife in this case is played by Riley Keough of American Honey and Mad Max, and the Girlfriend Experience fame by this point. Not just Elvis's granddaughter anymore, so good for her.
Good for her.
Good for her. Yeah, and they have a little boy as well. So the marketing of this movie, I believe, did a bit of a disservice to probably what people ended up expecting that was going to happen. Maybe they thought it was going to be a zombie movie because the trailer has like a crusty person bleeding from the mouth and they look dead and deranged. So maybe it's going to be about zombies. It Comes at Night. A dog's barking, in the poster at the nighttime, and you think, okay, there's going to be action and craziness and it's going to be a thrill fest and all of that, but it's not that. In the last 15 minutes it gets tense because some decisions are made in terms of what these families are going to do, whether one person is sick or not, and well, if one person's sick, that person and their family must leave, but they can't just leave because for all we know they're going to come back. And this is it's not getting into spoiler territory necessarily to say that everyone, I guess, in the world of this world is scared and they don't know what's happening outside of it, and electricity's down and food's scarce and access to clean water is scarce. And so, hey, can we just get these people to leave, or do we have to worry about them coming back? And so when it gets to the last 15 to 20 minutes, it gets pretty tense. But up until then, there are, let's just say, a lot of dream sequences. I don't want to say red herrings necessarily, but I can understand how audiences that were thinking maybe this would be. I was telling a friend maybe an example of a movie that gave people that like intellectual horror mixed with people that like, more of the routine genre elements of slashing and blah blah blah. Like 28 Days Later gave you zombies, and it gave you terror, and it gave you killings, and it also gave you great scenic photography and location shooting, and so it could appeal, I think, to a lot of people, and that actually did pretty well at the box office if you look at the numbers and domestically in the U.S. And this movie, I think, sides too much, whether it's a fault or not, but just thinking about monetary, reasoning right now, it's not going to satiate that appetite for horror in the traditional genre sense that maybe people that grew up on Scream, would like, or even the Walking Dead fans, let's say. As a movie, my biggest problem was the lack of characterizations within, particularly the female characters. The men I thought were oddly a little bit miscast, outside of the 7-year-old boy that's in it. I didn't quite believe the familial relationships between spouses, and so by the end of it, I think one problem is that you probably don't have as much of a rooting interest in these people as you would have if you just got to know a little bit more. Because it's a little too general instead of specific. And Carmen Ejogo, as this wife, she kind of pops up more as an active character and player in the last 15, 20 minutes. And she starts doing things where it's like, wow, I wish I had gotten to know that character more, because she seems assertive and strong and all this stuff. And, the previous 16 minutes had gone before you, and you'd had no sense that was coming at all. So I think that in terms of tone, it is consistent. I think that you can see that Trey Edward Schultz has a nice eye, and there's good filmmaking at night. Mm-hmm. But I can see why people have kind of reacted against this as well, unfortunately. I don't nearly think it's bad. It's not horrible, but it's also not, I guess, to the level of some recent films like The Witch.
Yeah. Well, I guess if people are looking for some added, added opinion and analysis on that, they can go to cinematary.com. Andrew wrote about It Comes at Night and talked a lot about The Witch and kind of comparisons with A24 in this movie. So I'd recommend checking that out. But Logan, you had another movie you wanted to talk about?
The other film I saw recently was Beatrice at Dinner. Miguel Arteta directed the film, and Mike White wrote it. Two people. Mike White I had primarily known from the television series Enlightened, but they had worked together before on previous projects. And Miguel Arteta had directed The Good Girl with Jennifer Aniston, Jake Gyllenhaal several years ago, and I think more recently This Is Our Youth, or Youth and Revolt. I can't remember the names. Anyway, though, this film has been publicized kind of as being particularly relevant now because Salma Hayek plays Mexican masseuse who's very much into holistic treatments. She knows everything. Let's say a character has kidney stones, she knows exactly what you should do, all of those things. And she has a client played by Connie Britton, and Salma Hayek's car breaks down, and she can't get back to what she needs to take care of. Unfortunately, earlier in the day, she had an animal of hers that was killed, and so she really wants to go home, but no one can get her and take her back. And Connie Britton says, "Well, Beatrice, you worked with us for years. You can come to dinner. We're having dinner tonight. And here comes dinner time, and John Lithgow plays an obnoxious, belligerent, big estate owning, and I don't know about buildings, but hotels and things like that. Media mogul, entrepreneur, magnate. And obviously the media has been saying, who does that remind you of? It kind of reminds you of Donald Trump. And John Lithgow's character's name is Doug Strutt. Anyway, Salma Hayek believes, her character Beatrice believes in fate and destiny. And I just met you, and there has to be a reason for this, why our paths are crossing. And during this dinner, she wonders if she's meeting this guy who reminds her of something that happened to a place that she used to live at being, taken over, and she's protesting, and she's wondering at first, well, is this guy a part of this? So she's thinking, am I here? Am I supposed to make a positive impact on him? Well, Beatrice also likes to drink, and the other party goers like to as well. And as the night unfolds, she goes from kind of thinking at one point, I need to help him, to maybe I'm supposed to kill him. And this just continues to evolve until the finale, let's say. So I wanted to talk about this movie because I understand why it's been written about in the way in terms of Hayek's this Mexican immigrant and Lithgow as this Trump figure, and putting these two at dinner, that seems compelling for audiences and everything. And I understand that, and it's good clickbait for your articles if you're going to mention that. But to me, what this movie is really about is how you deal with someone with completely different, a completely opposite worldview to your own, and the tactics that you enlist to kind of go about communicating with that person in a way that you try to prevent from seeming contentious, that leads to fighting, that leads to nothing other than just you in your corner, I'm going to stay in my corner, and there's not going to be anything, to kind of help both of us see eye to eye on something. That's where the movie is really interesting to me, because, I feel like recently in our country, people have had a very difficult time communicating with the other side, and myself included. and you really see this manifest in her character, and she does a lot of the wrong things. So it's not just a movie saying Beatrice is perfect and it's the John Lithgows of the world that are awful. It's really asking you to think about communication and how do we actually move forward instead of wanting to kill each other, basically. And that was a real surprise to me. I didn't think that the movie was going to, hit me on that level. But it absolutely did. And, the ending is where the movie might live or die for some people. But the more I thought about the ending, the more I love it, actually. And obviously I can't address specifically what happens, but it's going to make you think. And I don't think it's the ending that it's not necessarily the ending post Hillary Clinton that people that voted for Hillary would necessarily want. Let me just say that.
All right.
But that doesn't mean that the clues weren't there in the film, that this was a plausible conclusion.
Huh.
So I hope that I've kind of made you, any listener out there, a little bit more intrigued about the film. And I want anyone that is questioning the ending after they see it, I want you to ask yourself, I want you to do a review in your head over what was happening up to this decision. Let's just say that.
All right.
So, I'm being vague, but
No.
you'll understand why
All
you
right.
know.
Well, I know. Yeah, Beatrice at dinner. I feel like that'll probably expand in the coming weeks as kind of a art house film to check out.
Yeah, certainly.
But yeah, Nathan, you had a pair of films you want to talk about.
Yeah, so the first film that I wanted to talk about, I actually meant to talk about when I was last on, I think, or sometime in the past month that I was on, because I watched this film for the first time in May with Cinematary co-host Andrew Swafford, and then I rewatched it again just this past week because it has been on my mind ever since. That movie is Michael Mann's 1995 masterpiece Heat.
Did you watch the recently released what is it, the remastered version, the one that just came out like a few months ago?
When Andrew and I watched it together, he had just gotten that Blu-ray, which is why we ended up watching it. The version I just watched, though, is the version I have on DVD and is not the new remaster. I will tell you, though,
Gotcha.
I mean, there is I think a visual difference on the remaster, but actually I think the experience is kind of indistinguishable, because really, at least from what I have read, other than some kind of color tinkering, the only difference is that Mann cut out 2 lines of dialogue, and that's it, which is pretty restrained if you're familiar at all kind of with his history of constant tinkering with his movies. Some listeners who know me and my taste may be surprised that I had not seen this film yet, given that I am kind of the podcast's resident Michael Mann stan, as you could say. And I actually owned like a bootleg streetwear t-shirt for this movie before I even saw it. So, you can call me out for that. I'm a little bit of a fake, but also I knew I was going to love this movie. And so it's no surprise that I did. And it is the 4th film in Michael Mann's filmography that I have given 5 out of 5 stars to on Letterboxd. The other 3 being, Miami Vice, Manhunter, and Last of the Mohicans. This film stars an incredible cast: Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, Val Kilmer, Jon Voight, Tom Sizemore, Ashley Judd, a very young Natalie Portman, Tom Noonan, Wes Studi, Danny Trejo, Henry Rollins, Dennis Haysbert, who you might know from 24 or the Allstate commercials. As Kanye once called him, the fake Denzel. The rapper Tone Lock, I think is how you pronounce him. I've never been sure how to pronounce his name. But yeah, this is a kind of a massive stacked cast of actors set in Los Angeles. Robert De Niro plays a master criminal, a bank robber. Al Pacino, in kind of what I really feel like is sort of the pivotal turning point in Al Pacino's career, where he went from being this kind of like classically great respected actor to somebody who kind of had a little bit of a shtick. And I think it's before Robert De Niro got to that point. In this movie, Al Pacino does a lot of the things that he's become known for over the past 2 decades, a lot of the yelling, the histrionics, the kind of overacting. He and Robert De Niro are kind of bound up in this John Woo-like relationship where the cop and the criminal have more in common than they think. Both of their lives are kind of constant wrecks. They don't really like to hold on to things that would otherwise keep them tethered, I guess. They don't really like to live the kind of conventional life. Al Pacino is desperately trying to keep together his 3rd marriage. Robert De Niro doesn't have a family or anyone that he loves. He does fall in love in the movie, and there's this kind of internal struggle as to whether he should kind of keep on with his criminal life and potentially hurt this person that he loves, or should he just kind of leave that life behind and go off with her. It's a very steely, cool blue movie, which should not be a shock to anyone who's ever seen a Michael Mann movie. It's absolutely gorgeous. Robert De Niro's house overlooks the ocean, and there are all these stunning vistas of Los Angeles, these just dark, dreamy night skies. It's got a really great soundtrack, a lot of Moby songs, which I'm always a fan of. You know, it's I think really like everybody here is firing on full cylinders. The writing is just kind of classic Mann. You have all these just kind of like, I feel like characters in Michael Mann movies speak in this way where the words that they're saying are, you know, kind of like somewhat conventional, hard-boiled noir speak, and that they're things that people definitely maybe wouldn't say in real life, but just the way they're delivered is so calm and so quiet that you kind of don't really think about the fact that what they're saying is very obviously written. It doesn't feel artificial.
I'm curious because you're at this point with De Niro and Pacino. You know, Pacino's what is it? I believe it's post Scarface and stuff like that. For De Niro, it's literally the same year as Casino, but it's also post like Goodfellas. You know, he's in kind of that back nine of his hot streak. I feel like Heat and Casino are probably kind of the last, you know, part of that. But I mean, where do you see these performances kind of in both their pantheons?
I think that Robert De Niro, it's still kind of continuing, I think, sort of the same earlier part of his career. You know, he's very quiet and restrained, but there's kind of a lot going on internally. I mean, I think it's a lot of kind of like facial and gestural acting on his part. He's quiet. He stands and looks a lot. There's this great moment where he's standing on a balcony with his girlfriend, and she asks him if he's lonely, and he says like, well, I am alone, but I'm not lonely. And just the way that he says that, I mean, the line itself, you know, that's kind of that's not like the most profound thing that's ever been written, but the way that he says it is just like, there's this just space kind of between the first and the second half of the sentence that's just like, kind of stabs you in the chest. Whereas Al Pacino has definitely, I think, you know, and so Robert De Niro, he's not at the, it's not Meet the Parents yet. You know, it's not to this point of his career where every role he plays is winking at previous roles he's played, and kind of playing off of this persona. It's not, you know, it's not a self-aware performance in that regard. Al Pacino, on the other hand, you know, on one hand, his performance is kind of has two halves to it. You know, it has that same thing as De Niro in this movie where there is a lot of restraint and there is a certain amount of quiet and of kind of, you see the storm on his face, but he doesn't really need to vocalize what he's feeling internally. But he is someone who I think the two characters are contrasted with each other because they are both similar, but at the same time, Al Pacino's life is a lot more visibly kind of a wreck because he has attempted to invest himself in emotional relationships, and just because of who he is as a person, he can't really commit to those relationships. Whereas Robert De Niro's character understands that because of his life as a criminal, he can't make commitments. You know, and the line that gives the movie its name, you know, he is ready to walk out on anything when he feels the heat around the corner. So he has kind of, you know, lives this Zen-like monk life almost, whereas Al Pacino doesn't want to admit to himself that the only thing that he loves is his job and his work. So he's trying to make all these relationships work and his life is falling apart. So he kind of is the thing that breaks the icy surface of the movie, because every once in a while he'll just like start hitting the table and like throwing things and yelling. And it's in this way where like it kind of disarms you, and it makes you want to laugh at first, especially if you're just kind of like accustomed to, you know, Al Pacino of the past 20 years of like Jack and Jill, you know, where he's just kind of sad and doesn't look too good and is kind of making fun of himself. So there is a little bit of that, but I think it really works just because it's in sharp contrast to everything else that's in the movie. And even besides them, there's so many other amazing performances. I mean, Dennis Haysbert is in the movie for maybe like 10 minutes tops, and he has this very, very tiny subplot that just kind of pops up throughout the movie. But he gives this just like incredible, devastating performance, and like
What's he been doing? I see him all the time in commercials, but post Far From Heaven.
yeah, right. He was in The Unit on CBS.
Actor.
I don't know.
See. Yeah, because
but,
I always thought he was great, pretty much. It says that he's in The Dark Tower coming up,
mhm,
but a lot of TV series, yeah.
yeah,
But that's
But it's
some person that Hollywood has let down.
yeah.
Let's just say.
But it's like when his character, spoil it, his character dies. It's like the whole movie from there kind of is this just in free fall and just becomes this like tragic, devastating thing. So I feel like I'm just kind of like throwing a lot of adjectives out there. But this movie, obviously, I watched it twice in 1 month, and I kind of like am in this headspace where I feel like I could watch it like every night and just turn it on and like fall asleep to it and then wake up. But there's a really beautiful remaster that's just out now, as Zach mentioned. Check it out if you haven't already.
I'm putting it on the list.
The other movie, since I've kind of went long on Heat, I'll just say a little bit about, even though it's a very important and very monumental and great work of documentary filmmaking, which is not something that I am usually like super into documentaries. I don't watch tons of them. When I do, I kind of don't know what to do with them. As you listen to our documentary series, probably that all of us are still kind of novices maybe when it comes to documentaries. But on the recommendation of a few friends from Twitter, I watched Patricio Guzman's The Battle of Chile, which is a 3-part documentary from the 1970s. Patricio Guzman is a Chilean filmmaker. This film follows the kind of the downfall and unraveling of the leftist government run by Salvador Allende in the early 1970s, and the eventual kind of U.S.-aided fascist takeover of Chile, which led to the really awful reign of Pinochet, the dictator who was in power until the end of the 80s. So this film is like very on the ground. It was filmed in Chile when kind of things were falling apart, when things were going down, beginning in 1972, I think. Salvador Allende was kind of a democratic socialist, very popular with kind of the people, the working class in Chile, but absolutely despised by the upper classes, by the far right, by kind of the religious base in Chile, and also by the United States. And with the assistance of the United States, the far right party, the National Party, and the center right party, the Christian Democrats, kind of engineered a series of strikes to start to destroy the Chilean economy and turn people against Allende. It didn't really work out as planned, so the military launched a coup and overthrew Allende. So this film was being filmed while all of this was happening on film stock that was supplied by the French filmmaker Chris Marker. You have a mixture of really kind of in the streets, kind of messy photography with a lot of interviews and extended, almost kind of these sequences that are kind of like recording discussions and speeches happening between kind of leftists in Chile trying to figure out how to respond to this, what to do, how to go forward. So it's kind of a mixture of that. The first part is sort of following elections and the beginnings of the coup. The second part really follows the coup to its end and to the beginnings, the real beginning of the fascist takeover. And the third part jumps back in time to the earlier 1970s when a lot of workers and rural peasants were getting together, trying to nationalize some of the industries in Chile. And and kind of figuring out how to stand up for themselves and how to fight for their rights. Guzman was banned from Chile because of this film, and it was not screened in Chile until the 1990s. I think it's the fact that it exists is reason enough for it to be seen. But on a formal level too, it's really compelling. I mean, I know kind of maybe some of my description of it doesn't sound that engaging unless you're interested in the subject, because it is a lot of, like I said, a lot of kind of just like in the streets and interviews with people, not necessarily talking heads, but interviews with people while they are kind of doing things, while they are involved, you know, going to factories and asking the workers how they feel about the government, how they feel about kind of the pushback, the opposition on the right against the popular government. So you're really getting a sense of what the people and what the working class in Chile feel. You know, it's not at a distance, it's very in it. But also there is, you know, I was watching the first part, and I was interested in the topic. I was following it, but at the end of the first part is probably the most single devastating thing I have ever seen in a movie. At the end of the film, it's following kind of the beginning of the military coup. There was an initial coup in the beginning of I think summer of 1973 that failed, and then the successful coup at the end of that summer in a few months. So it's following that first coup, and like the cameramen are in the streets, and there are some soldiers who are kind of firing at people, who are killing people, and there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of chaos. You're not really sure what's going on, and then the camera just kind of like veers off to one side and clatters to the ground, and there's a lot of just the camera shaking, and then it cuts to kind of that moment just a few minutes before, when you see those soldiers when they're firing on the citizens of Chile, or the people. And this voiceover comes in and tells you that what just happened, all this kind of confusion, and you're not sure what's going on. What happened is that the soldiers fired on the cameraman. So when you see that camera fall, you are literally seeing the person shooting this die. And it kind of slows down the footage a little bit. It reframes things. It kind of it kind of like adjusts the aspect ratio and really focuses on the soldier, so you can get a clear view of what's going on. And so you see the soldier who killed the cameraman point his gun at the camera freezes, and it's like this kind of unintentional haunting callback to the Great Train Robbery, except then once the camera starts moving again, once it unfreezes, you, like, the person filming actually dies. And another one of the cameramen who worked on this was imprisoned and was never heard from after that. Like I said, Guzman and others who worked on the film had to flee, had to assemble it in Cuba, and then it was shown in the United States in the late 70s. So do check this film out. Like I said, it's on one hand, it is a little bit of a reassuring movie, because, you know, things are bad in the United States, but they are not quite this bad. But on the other hand, it is a little bit uncomfortable watching, like, students in Chile participate in pro-fascist protests. That's kind of like a little too close to home to, you know, things that are kind of happening right now. But I think if you're interested in the material, but if you're also interested in really powerful and compelling documentary filmmaking, or just filmmaking in general, because I think hopefully based on kind of that description of that one moment, that'll be enough to get you to see this film, because I do really think it is essential viewing and should be seen more. There's a great DVD box set by, I think it's by Icarus Films, who put out a lot of documentaries. I think they are the ones who put out a really great box set of this movie. I watched it at the Knox County Library, so check it out.
Cool. All right. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back with part 2, talking Tabu, the 1933 version, after this.
Hello, Cinematary listeners. This is Andrew Swafford with an important message during this break in the show. Cinematary would like you to know that we do not want your money, and we don't want to place ads in the show at this time. That's not why we do this. We do it because we enjoy each other's company and because we want to bring you our pure, unadulterated opinions on the world of cinema. However, there are a few things you can do to help out the show that we would greatly appreciate. Firstly, leave us a review on iTunes, preferably a positive one, because the algorithm gods tell us that reviews increase our podcast exposure. Secondly, send us a tweet at Cinematary, or better yet, send an email to cinematary@yahoo.com so that we can hear from you guys for a change. Maybe you think I'm an idiot for not liking Singing in the Rain, or maybe you have a suggestion of a movie that you really want to hear our opinion on. Regardless, let us know your thoughts, and we'll read them out and respond to them on future episodes of Cinematary. Finally, please share the show with friends and members of your family who you think would enjoy listening to and participating in our film discussions we bring to you guys every week. So to recap, review, send us your thoughts through Twitter and email, and share with your friends and family. We would truly appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Now let's get back to the show.
And we're back with part 2 of episode 148 of Cinematary. And in this part, we will be talking about 1931. I was wrong in the first part. 1931's Tabu, A Story of the South Seas, as part of our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series. This is directed and written by F.W. Murnau, which is our second Murnau film in this series. We did Sunrise last year, but it was co-written by Robert Flaherty. And the film starred all actors native to the South Seas, Sea Islands. In a title card, it reads, quote, "Only native-born South Sea Islanders appear in this film with a few half-casts in Chinese." The film is split into 2 chapters. The first, called Paradise, depicts the lives of 2 lovers on a South Seas island until they are forced to escape the island when the girl is chosen as a holy maid to the gods. The second chapter, Paradise Lost, depicts the couple's life on a colonized island and how they adapt to and are exploited by Western civilization. The title of the film comes from the Polynesian concept of tapu, spelled taboo in the Tongan before 1943, from which is derived the English word taboo. Which is T-A-B-O-O.
Can you actually... Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the title of the movie is T-A-B-U. The English word is T-A-B-O-O.
Okay.
With the exception of the opening scene, the film was directed solely by Murnau. This was his last film. He died in the hospital after an automobile accident on March 11th, 1931, a week before the film's premiere in New York City. Murnau was coming off 2 troubled Fox Studios productions, Four Devils in 1928 and City Girl in 1930, while Flaherty, the co-writer's Native American documentary, Acoma, the Sky City, had been shut down. The 2 directors knew each other through Flaherty's brother David, and Murnau expressed a desire to make a film in Tahiti with Flaherty, who had experience with the natives there. The two of Murnau and Flaherty, they wrote the story called Turia and started their own production company, Flaherty's Murnau Productions. Turia was based on a legend Flaherty had heard while working on W.S. Van Dyke's White Shadows in the South Seas in 1928, and contained many elements which would later evolve into the film Tabu, A Story of the South Seas. Murnau visited Tahiti in May 1929 and was joined by Flaherty a month later to scout for locations on the nearby island of Bora Bora. While scouting, they found their leading lady, Anne Chevalier, in a local cocktail bar. The production was originally supposed to be financed by a small production company called Color Art. By September, however, Murnau had only received $5,000 of the due money. After a series of telegrams asking for the rest of the money, Murnau got fed up and decided to fund the film himself. To cut costs, Murnau sent the Hollywood crew home and trained the natives to work as the film crew. He also scrapped plans to shoot the film in color and changed it to black and white. The film's script was rewritten and the title was changed to Tabu, A Story of the South Seas, to avoid potential legal issues with color art. This was the start of a poor working relationship between Flaherty and Murnau. Flaherty disliked the new script, feeling it was overly plotted and westernized. Production finished in October of 1930. Flaherty had been living on only $40 a week and was broke by the end of the shoot. A couple of days after the wrap, Flaherty sold his share of the film to Murnau for $25,000. Returning to LA, Murnau spent the winter editing the film and used the last of his money to hire Hugo Reisenfeld for the music scoring. The distribution rights were sold to Paramount for 5 years for the sum of $75,000, which helped Murnau pay off Flaherty. The film's ownership reverted to Murnau's mother after distribution rights lapsed in the mid-1930s. The original negative was returned to Germany, where it was destroyed during World War II. In 1940, Murnau's mother sold the worldwide distribution rights to Rowland and Samuel Brown. During World War II, the U.S. government seized the film, believing it was owned by German citizens. The brothers regained the film after the war and re-released the film in 1948, adding an alternate title sequence and cutting 5 minutes out of the film, including content that they deemed objectionable by the production code. The re-release was not a success, and in the 1960s, Murnau's nieces bought back the rights. In 1973, a complete nitrate print of the 1931 release was discovered and screened at the American Film Institute. Floyd Crosby funded a preservation negative by the UCLA Film and Television Archive based on his print to preserve the film for future generations. I put all of that insider baseball just for you, Lydia. But I could not find any reviews of the film, so I guess we're just going to move on. That's about all I could find on Tabu. I guess kicking off, Lydia, you didn't talk much in part one, so let's get your feelings about Tabu first.
Okay, first of all, it's really gorgeous. You'd mentioned in your little intro that it was supposed to be filmed in color, but the black and white looks really, really good. So I was really impressed with that.
Yeah.
As far as the story goes, I mean, thinking about it in comparison to Sunrise, which is, I mean, I've seen Nosferatu, that's Murnau, right?
Yes.
And Sunrise, it's kind of like, I guess he makes these really mythic movies about people that are just like archetypal people, like the couple in Tabu could be any kind of star-crossed forbidden lover couple sort of thing. So it feels like a simple story, but there's he covers a lot of ground. That's very vague.
Yeah. But I get what you're saying. Nathan, what did you feel? Actually, I feel like Nathan is the highest on the film out of all of us, so I'm gonna go next. Okay. I didn't dislike it, but I feel like you're much more high on it than I was. Like I did enjoy it. It's a lot. It is a beautiful film. It's a lot less. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I felt like it was a little less stylized than Sunrise and Nosferatu, especially Sunrise. He's doing a lot of stuff. But I was thinking to myself about that, though, and I was like, it doesn't have the kind of aesthetic panache that Sunrise or Nosferatu does have. But I thought something that was kind of... I don't know, groundbreaking, but something that innovating in this film is one. There's no title cards, really. I mean, the only kind of written word that you see is when they're reading notes or like signs or something. It does this like kind of transition to translate the words for us. But there's not really any title cards where people are kind of conversating. You're having to kind of go strictly on facial expressions and kind of following normal storytelling beats to kind of understand what's happening with these characters and how they're feeling, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I don't know. I also just kind of found the fact that it seems so stripped away from kind of the Hollywood system, even though it felt it kind of had the kind of classical Hollywood infrastructure. I like that all of these actors were native to the South Seas and how I felt like that was something that kind of differentiated Tabu from just a normal story that you'd see in this time period. But Nathan, what did you think?
Yeah, I think the kind of all the things that both you and Lydia mentioned are what I really like about this movie. I mean, first, just a second, Lydia, I think it's absolutely gorgeous. It's I can't imagine this movie in color.
I can't
at all. I don't know. I think it would feel like Lydia said, a lot less mythic, because I think kind of the dreaminess of this movie is really important to it. Like, for example, and I'm not somebody who ever really gets hung up on special effects or anything, but I feel like the shark in this movie, if it were in color, would be a lot less effective and would just look kind of fake for lack of a better word, even though it's still, obviously fake in the black and white. I think it already has this dreaminess to it.
It doesn't have to be a real shark for there to be
exactly.
Tabu
We're not
in that area. Yeah.
I will add though that like the underwater shark is it's kind of cute. You kind of, it's very entertaining. But when he's outside of the water and it like you see the fins and stuff, that was pretty effective. I don't know if they shot like a real shark or something, but it looked it looked like there was actually something in the water.
And I think too, just a lot of those night scenes are really kind of terrifying. Like there are a few shots of I need to refresh on their names. The
older man,
just like like him too. When he kind of approaches the hut is freaky. But just when Matahi and Riri, I guess are how you say their names. When they're both in the hut together and like one of them is awake and the other one is asleep, and like when she is looking out and seeing Hitu kind of approach, and it's just very still and there's not a lot of movement. And, just like this other person is in there asleep, not knowing what's going on. That's really effectively kind of freaky to me.
Yeah.
But Zach, the other things you mentioned were also things that were kind of what really struck me about it. I guess from my end, the only other films by Murnau that I've seen are Nosferatu and Sunrise. But from my understanding, he really was not a fan of title cards. And I think The Last Laugh from 1924, he originally made it without title cards, and then the studio like forced him to put one in. It's my understanding that he didn't like them all too much, and I think they kind of. There are certain silent films where they work. I think there are other times where they're used too extensively. To give a good example of a good use of title cards, I watched this just yesterday. Joseph von Sternberg's The Docks of New York from 1928, which is just like one of the best romances I've ever seen. And the title cards in that movie, I feel like you can really, even though you've never heard the characters speak, you can really hear the title cards kind of in their voices, and they really reflect their personalities and just kind of accentuate the romance and the emotion. Whereas here, it's like, I think that not having them just makes the story both more kind of mythic and dreamy and set in this kind of fairy tale world. But on the other hand, it's like, I think it also it forces me both to pay more attention as a viewer, I think, just because I know there's kind of like not a crutch to rely on that will explain something. But it also, I think it kind of shows just like Murnau's skill as a filmmaker and being able to really kind of communicate this story without the use of text that appears outside of the narrative.
I wanna read this Letterboxd review. Nathan, you liking it brought it to my attention. This is by the Letterboxd user not Ignacy Vishnevetsky. He's Ignatiy Vishnevetsky, the critic for AV Club and former host of At the Movies. Oh, it's the real one? Yeah. Well, it's like somebody who has like set up an account to like post his old reviews. Oh, okay. Anyway. But Anyway, I really like this, what he said about Tabu. I'm going to read it real quickly. He said, and he kind of compares it to Sunrise. He says, realism is the opposite of reality. A black and white image, like a silent image, is not realistic. Yet it has no choice but to be real. So when one says that F.W. Murnau's Sunrise and Tabu feel more real, more alive than most movies, it doesn't matter that they strive for, quote, realism. Tabu, co-scripted by Robert Flaherty and shot on location in Tahiti with a native cast, doesn't even strive strive for ethnography. They're fabulistic, fantastic. They're what supporters of realism call, quote, stylized. But Sunrise's foggy marshes and hazardous city streets, or Tabu's spear hunts, feel like living. There isn't much to say or write about either film, but not because 80 years of film history have exhausted them. They just seem to interface directly with the act of being alive. Tabu's island is wherever you may live. Sunrise's titular dawn starts with the audience when the audience leaves the theater. And that was when I read that on Letterboxd, it did kind of it made me appreciate Tabu a little bit more, because I really liked Sunrise last year, and this one made me appreciate Tabu also because I like that concept of, quote, realism and quote, stylized, and kind of living in this kind of in between space of fantasy. I think that there's really the essence of cinema in the in between of realism and in stylization. It kind of, and I like that. I feel like Murnau's films kind of straddle that line where you can feel a lot of humanity and true emotions in these characters, like the scenes you were mentioning earlier, Nathan, when they're kind of one's asleep, one's awake, and they're struggling with stuff, and you have these frightening images, but at the same time it still kind of keeps that the fantasy, the absurdity of cinema alive. I think that straddling that line makes it much more effective, but I don't know, what do you guys think?
I was going to start saying something and then I just kind of blanked on what I was going to say.
Lydia, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I also saw that review, and I wasn't necessarily thinking about realism, but the comment about ethnography I thought was really interesting, because a lot of times, especially in the 30s, you have like white American or European people going and just filming quote unquote exotic places and being pretty condescending about it, or fetishistic, sort of like exoticism. And that was totally avoided here. And I also think that's because of Murnau's interest in, again, this mythic and bigger than just culture, or like a specific culture or location. And I really liked that. Again, because any couple could, or not any couple, what was the line? Any island is where you are.
Wherever you live is the island.
So yes, exactly. I really liked that.
Yeah.
And I think there's kind of a, wherever you are is the island that's really communicated in the structure of the film, because you've got these two halves, Paradise and Paradise Lost, and just kind of like, if you didn't watch the movie and you just knew that those were the two halves of the movie, I think your image of the movie would be different than what it actually is, because the movie starts off and there is like kind of, this like paradise, and it's like everyone's happy, everyone's joyful. It could very easily become the kind of just like, oh, the happy carefree islanders dancing for 90 minutes.
They love to dance, man. They love to take their tops off and dance.
Just, look at those
lot of cleavage.
Look at those breasts, but it's, hey, that's how it is over there. It's, oh, everybody's just naked, okay, but so.
Yeah.
It's really, it's not that, it's kind of like both halves have their moment of paradise, the island has the first island, has a moment of paradise, and then Riri is, chosen as this sacred virgin, and things get bad. And then they kind of go to the more, modernized island. And there's also the dancing and the carefree, they're having fun. They think they've escaped, but then again, it comes back, and so you see this kind of, on one hand, that's like there's no escaping the old gods. It's like once kind of, you can never really kind of escape your culture, your heritage, where you're from. Yeah, it's, I don't know, that makes me think of like my big fat Greek wedding. but then it's like too, there's this new god, the god of money. It says early on, like the captain or whoever who's making notes says like, oh, we've got this great diver, he doesn't understand money. Well, within like 20 minutes he's definitely going to understand money, because he's got all these debts and these new complications that he has to worry about. So it's like both sides are kind of mirrored. They have their kind of their beauty and their space for the creation of paradise, but there are these gods that whatever form they take, that kind of end up destroying dreams and creating this really tragic ending. And to second Lydia's point about how this kind of like escapes the problems of ethnography, I think it really. I think Murnau does a good job of proving that proving that the kind of story that I think, even today in Hollywood might be viewed as this kind of like a niche story or this exotic story, that it's really a universal story. But it also, on the other hand, it kind of, I think we're used to saying, like, we watch a movie from the 30s or even, from the 60s or the 70s or the 80s, and we just kind of say like, oh, well, that's how like it was. People had these kind of outdated ideas. They didn't really think about race or gender or sexuality or whatever in the quote unquote, right, progressive, whatever word you want to use kind of way. But, then you see a movie like this, which, like, sure, maybe it has probably its issues too. And it has some stereotypes and whatnot, but it's still like so much better than even movies that came decades after, and even movies that are being made today in a lot of ways. And
it's, at least it's like it's striving to work in that culture. It's not trying to. It's not like on the outside. Murnau is definitely attempting to really to make it from that perspective, even if there may be problems or whatever
and I
from
think
the outside.
By like kind of just letting the people who live here kind of tell their story, and sure, it's kind of a it's a fictional, mythic, fantastical story. By letting them have their story, it becomes more of a universal story. It doesn't like try hard to be something that people of all cultures can relate to, because it just kind of is that. From there's really no like divide at the end of the day, I guess.
It's like diving really deep into the neo-realism, the Italians, like, use non-actors, use the people who have lived that life, but like way earlier.
Yeah. Any of this translate to 2012's Tabu, Logan?
You know what? When you were giving your enchanting intro, and you mentioned that it was divided into two parts, this Tabu, the 2012 Tabu, was also divided into two parts. You want to know what their parts were called? Part 1 was called A Lost Paradise, and Part 2 was called Paradise. And shot in black and white. And in 2012, obviously, that's a specific choice. And Miguel Gomez was kind of challenged on that, because they were like, you're going to Africa. Why would you not shoot in color when you're in Africa and you're going to these beautiful places? And he said, he had a specific idea for why it made sense in terms of this story, which Part 1 is set in Portugal, contemporary story, and Part 2 is really what's told in flashback, and it's in Africa, and it's recounting this main character from Part 1's earlier life. And what's interesting about the memory, the depiction of memory in this film, is there's no dialogue in those scenes. The flashbacks there's voiceover, narration. But as depicted here, it kind of makes you think about how you interpret your own memories. Are your memories visual? Do you remember what people say in them? Or do you remember more so kind of what happened in A, B, C, D? And in this film, which it recounts and elicits love affair between, a married woman pregnant with her husband's child who's having an affair with a guy that, obviously it's taboo in that respect.
Naturally.
Naturally. And, the reasons why she kept this a secret her whole life. And I guess you could talk about, here the references to animals. What did you say? A shark was in the 31 version, or? So yeah, here, crocodile specifically the main character in terms of the animals, and there's imagery, or the very very first 6 minutes are specifically about kind of this mythic spiritual sense of this woman waiting with a crocodile by the river, and it's kind of like this old wise tale, or old kind of mystical sense of what's she doing, and what secrets does she have. And so you obviously can think of the crocodile as metaphorical and whatever you want to do with that, but it sounds like you all pretty much recommend the 31 version, or not. This isn't a remake obviously, but the 31 film, and I certainly recommend this one as well. I didn't always enjoy it, but overall I did. So I'll say that. And yeah, the first 25 minutes are challenging. Do as I did: drink 8 cups of water, brush your teeth, sweep, and then after you've kind of settled in, and part 2, it really does kind of get going. So there you go.
Yeah.
Hitchcock advised that. Hitchcock advised. He always said, the first 10 or so minutes, the audience is still trying to figure out what kind of movie they're watching. And so that's why he did some cameos early on in movies, because he said, well, if I did it too late, that would really break what I've kind of built. So do it earlier, So
It's true.
That's my.
But yeah, Lydia, Nathan, feelings on the 1931 Tabu as we head out.
I liked it a lot. I mean, I think I liked it more than you guys. I also liked Sunrise a lot. For whatever reason, I think I actually liked this more than Sunrise. It kind of hit me more emotionally. I think I need to rewatch Sunrise. But just something about kind of the specific circumstances of this movie and its production, I just felt like added another element that was not there with Sunrise, even though their stories are kind of, and the structure is kind of similar, I think.
Yeah. Lydia?
I also liked it, maybe not as much as you, Nathan, but I would definitely recommend it. I think Murnau gets at a kind of darkness in people. Like Sunrise ultimately had kind of a sweet ending, but it goes dark places, and this one ends in a dark place.
Yeah.
So that, I think, is kind of an interesting strain. I'll have to watch more of him.
Yeah. I would recommend this as well. I really, really enjoyed Sunrise when we watched it last year. Last year. And I think this is one I want to watch again. I think I'll get more out of it after reading some reviews and stuff. I think I want to kind of watch it again with that frame of mind, and I think I'll enjoy it even more. But yeah, Tabu, very good. Cool. Well, I think that'll wrap up this episode of Cinematary. Of course, you can find us on cinematary.com. We're on social media at Facebook, at facebook.com/cinematary, at Twitter, at handle @cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/cinematary. We'll repost all of the movies that we talked about in this episode. Next week, we're going to be continuing our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series with a nice musical, 1944's Meet Me in St. Louis. Some Judy Garland action. But before we wrap up, a few notes. Please go to cinematary.com. Our latest video essay is on the site now. Andrew Swafford made Scarlett Johansson the Iron Maiden. It's a look at her career and kind of how she's crafted the specific image for herself through her movie choices over the years. I would recommend that if you're a Scarlett Johansson fan, or if you're just interested in kind of the anatomy of an actor It's a great essay. It's on the Cinematary website and on YouTube. Also, if you are in the Knoxville area, I would recommend going to the Knox. A friend of the podcast, William Mahaffey. He is currently raising some money for Central Cinema, which is this art house film theater that they're trying to put together in Knoxville. So I know we kind of came from Knoxville. So if any listeners are from that area, I would recommend and encourage you guys to donate some money for that cause. It's a great cause to have a theater like that in Knoxville. You can find that at the Knoxville Horror Film Fest's Twitter and Facebook and so on. I think that Cinematary, we posted it on our Facebook and our Twitter as well. But yeah, that'll wrap up this episode. Thanks you guys for listening. We'll see you next week.